Welcome to the Deep Dive. We cut through the noise to give you the clearest take on today's big stories. And today, we're looking at something really fascinating out of Alberta, Canada. A policy roller coaster, you could say. It's a story that just highlights really powerfully how fast public reaction can actually change government direction. We're talking about book bans in schools there.
Absolutely. It's been quite the dynamic situation. So our mission here is to unpack this whole thing. We'll trace it from the start, this government order about removing sexually explicit content, right through the frankly unexpected backlash, when classic books suddenly appeared on these removal lists. And then crucially, how this famous author stepped in with, well, a pretty pointed satirical piece, leading to a super quick pause and a promise to rewrite the whole policy.
Yeah, it's a really compelling case study, especially, if you're trying to understand how policies actually get made or unmade, or if you're just grappling with these debates about censorship versus age appropriateness in schools. It shows how interpretation matters, how public opinion weighs in, and even how sometimes one literary figure can shake things up. We'll explore all those angles for you. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where did this all kick off? It goes back to July 2025. Alberta's Education Ministry, under Premier Daniel Smith's government, they issued this order, basically telling school boards, get materials containing explicit sexual content out of your libraries. And the deadline was October 1st.
Right. And the initial wording, it tried to make a distinction. It said books with explicit sexual content were just out. Banned for everyone, K to 12, simple enough maybe. But then there was this other category, non-explicit sexual content. Those could be okay, but only for grade 10 and up, and only if, they were deemed educationally appropriate.
Yeah.
That distinction. It seemed clear on paper, maybe, but it caused a lot of trouble down the line. And we should mention the education minister, Dimitrios Nicolaides, he actually ordered 4 specific books removed right at the start, kind of setting a tone.
And what was really pushing this? Who was asking for it? Well, we saw some pretty active lobbying from certain parent groups. Groups like Action for Canada, Parents for Choice, and Education PCE. They were really pushing for these kinds of restrictions. Their stated goal, the one they put out publicly, was straightforward, protect kids from sexually explicit material.
Yeah, and if you look a bit wider, some critics like James Turk from the Center for Free Expression, they draw a line here. They suggest some of these groups maybe came out of other movements, like anti-vax campaigns, and have kind of shifted focus, often targeting books that deal with LGBTQ plus identities, framing it under this umbrella of parents' rights. And it's not just library books, right? Alberta also brought in opt-in for sex ed, and they started vetting presentations about gender identity or sexuality in schools. Now, proponents argue this is about parental rights, about protecting kids from stuff parents find inappropriate. Critics, though, they see it as censorship.
So what were the initial books that the province itself flagged, just to give you a concrete idea? They pointed to 4 graphic novels: Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe, Fun Home by Alison Bechtel, Blankets by Craig Thompson, and Flamer by Mike Curato. And it's worth noting, 3 of those deal directly with LGBTQ plus stories. Premier Smith later gave examples from these. She mentioned things like oral sex, threesomes, and an image involving a child having their pants pulled down by an adult. That was the kind of explicit content she said they wanted gone. Okay, but then things took a really unexpected turn, didn't they? The Edmonton Public School Board, EPSB, they got this broad order and started their review. And by late August, they came up with this huge list. Over 200 books they identified for removal. And well, that list got out, shared with teachers, then boom, social media.
And that's where the policy rubber really hit the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
The EPSB, for their part, said they followed the rules. They stated they worked over the summer to ensure that only books that directly met the criteria were added to the removal list. But this massive list, full of classics, it just instantly showed the problem was such a broad order. Even if the intent was one thing, the interpretation on the ground led to something much, much bigger. Almost a textbook case of unintended consequence.
Oh, absolutely. Because this wasn't just the graphic novels anymore, not by a long shot.
Yeah.
Suddenly you had these globally famous, widely taught books on the chopping block. We're talking The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, 1984, Orwell, Brave New World, Huxley, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and others. Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Ayn Rand, Margaret Lawrence, even Stephen King was on there. Jaws. It's just, wow, shows how easily these things can sweep up literature, doesn't it?
And it wasn't completely random either. The EPSB list actually had sections. There was a second part, over 50 titles like The Great Gatsby. These were flagged only for K-9 removal because they fell into that non-explicit sexual content category, meaning technically grade 10-12 students could still access them if deemed appropriate. So they were trying to follow the order's different rules, but it just highlighted how complex and, frankly, subjective the whole thing was becoming.
Well, Premier Smith was definitely not happy when she saw that Edmonton list.
Nice.
Not at all. She actually went public and accused the school board of vicious compliance, basically suggesting they did it on purpose, misinterpreted the order to make it look bad. She said, Edmonton Public is clearly doing a little vicious compliance.
Yeah.
So she got the board saying, we follow the order, and the premier saying, no, you did this maliciously. How do you even sort that out? Was it genuine confusion over a vague rule or something else?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it really puts school boards in a tough spot. They have to follow the ministry's orders legally, but they also have their own professional standards, their mission to educate. The premier doubled down, saying they've obviously put books on there that there was never any intention of having them target those books. And Minister Nicolaides also chimed in, asking EPSB for their reasoning on picking those classics. It really points to a major disconnect in how that order was understood, or perhaps how it was meant to be understood.
But then the whole story shifts again, because a very famous, very influential person weighed in. Margaret Atwood, author of The Handmaid's Tale. Her book is on the list, right?
Yeah.
And on August 31st, she responds.
And how? It wasn't just a statement, it was kind of a masterclass in using cultural influence. She posted this short story online, satirical. The title itself was a jab. Here's a piece of literature by me, suitable for 17-year-olds in Alberta schools, unlike we are told, The Handmaid's Tale. And the story. It pulled no punches, made fun of Premier Smith, selfish, rapacious capitalism, Ayn Rand fans. It ended with this zinger. So they lived happily ever after. But while they were doing that, The Handmaid's Tale came true, and Danielle Smith found herself with a nice new blue dress, but no job. The end.
Ouch.
Yeah. And she didn't stop there. She went on X, formerly Twitter,
Yeah.
tweeted something like, "Hi, kids, hashtag Handmaid's Tale, just been banned, and hashtag Edmonton, don't read it, your hair will catch on fire. Get one now before they have public book burnings." And that message, the story, the tweet, it just exploded globally, reposted everywhere. Atwood basically short-circuited the whole political debate. Used satire, her fame, hit them with massive public pressure from outside the usual channels. It shows how fast things can change when that happens. Incredibly fast, because just 2 days later, September 2nd, the government hits pause. Premier Smith's government announces the ban is halted until further notice. Minister Nicolaides emails the school boards directly. Pause all implementation efforts. Stop removing books. Stop making lists. Full stop.
And the official reason they gave for this sudden U-turn, they said it was just paused for a couple of hours while the ministerial order is rewritten, claimed there was some misunderstanding of the order. And Premier Smith specifically said Margaret Atwood played no role in the decision, despite the rather coincidental timing. It's just amazing how quickly that public pressure, especially channeled like that, seemed to force a change, whatever the official line was.
Okay, so after this very dramatic, very quick pause, what was the new plan? Premier Smith clarified things, right? She put it pretty bluntly. The direction will be to take books with pornographic images out and to leave the classics alone. Exactly. She even spelled it out on Twitter quite explicitly for a politician, actually. She tweeted, 1, get pornographic images out. 2, leave the classics on the shelves. 3, we all know the difference between 1 and 2. Let's not play any more games.
Yeah.
And she specifically said, it's images. Graphic images that were the concern, which, well, that raises its own questions, doesn't it? How do you define pornographic images versus, say, artistic depictions or challenging scenes in classic literature? It's still quite subjective.
Right, and lots of people were weighing in on that very challenge. Stakeholders had plenty to say. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the CCLA, they'd already warned the original order was overly broad. They worried it denied students access to important, thought-provoking literature.
And educators, librarians, they welcomed the pause, but cautiously. Joseph Jeffrey from Canadian School Libraries, he felt the first order was too broad and thought EPSB did its best, basically. An Edmonton librarian, Laura Winton, pointed out the obvious. When you start implementing censorship policies, it's always going to be subjective. And Robin Bright, a retired literacy professor, made the point that literature is where kids learn to wrestle with complexity, ambiguity, conflicting perspectives. They really argued for professional standards, not political directives.
Meanwhile, the political opposition, NDP leader Naheed Nenshi, he wasn't buying the government blaming the school boards. He basically said they decided to try to ignite a culture war, and it's backfired on them exceptionally badly.
Yeah.
Strong words there.
And you saw other boards reacting too, like the Calgary Board of Education. They just paused their whole review process. They had 500,000 titles to potentially look at, wisely decided to wait for the new rules. And the EPSB chair, Julie Cusick, just expressed commitment to, keeping communication going with the minister. So the next step was this new ministerial order expected around Friday, September 5th. But that core problem, like you said, it remains drawing that line between graphic images and classics clearly, objectively, without causing even more problems. It's tricky.
Now, let's zoom out for a second. Look at the bigger picture here. Lots of sources are saying this whole situation isn't happening in a vacuum. They point out that these kinds of book challenges have been ramping up in the U.S. for a few years, and now we're seeing similar things move north. These American-style culture wars crossing the border.
That's definitely a theme people are discussing. Academics like Ira Wells at U of T, he actually said, what we are seeing in Alberta is as extreme as we've seen in the southern United States. And again, you have that tension. Proponents frame it as protecting kids, parental rights, valid concerns for many people. But critics argue that even if the intention is good, banning books can easily slip into policing ideas, censoring ideas, and that threatens free inquiry in schools. It raises that fundamental question. Where's the line between protection and limiting exposure to complex realities?
Yeah, it really can become a slippery slope, can it? You risk creating this culture of fear, as some put it, limiting students' chances to actually think critically about tough issues. Because isn't that kind of the point of reading widely? To grapple with complexity, different viewpoints, build some empathy.
Precisely. And it highlights the difference between, say, the specific graphic content the government initially cited in those 4 novels and classic literature that tackles mature themes within a broader educational context. It reminds you of Ray Bradbury's warning in Fahrenheit 451, right? You don't have to burn books to destroy culture, just get people to stop reading them. The real danger, maybe, is when debates over what's age appropriate become a tool to just block access to diverse or challenging ideas altogether. Ideas kids might actually need to navigate the world.
So wrapping this up, we've traced this incredible back and forth in Alberta, from that broad order about explicit sexual content to the shock of seeing classics on the removal list, then Margaret Atwood's very public, very pointed intervention, and finally, the government hitting pause, promising a rewrite focused just on pornographic images. Quite a journey in just a few weeks.
It really is. And this deep dive, I think, it shows you so much about how policy actually works or doesn't work in practice, how interpretation matters, how powerful public opinion can be, especially when amplified by a major cultural figure. And it really throws that ongoing tension into sharp relief. How do we protect kids while still ensuring they get that rich, complex literary experience they need to develop critical thinking?
Which leaves us and you with a pretty big question to think about. In this age we live in, with so much information, so many strong opinions flying around, how do we actually help young people build critical thinking skills, build resilience? How do we do that without accidentally or maybe sometimes intentionally limiting their access to the very stories, the complex narratives that might prepare them for the messy reality of the world? What's our collective responsibility, really, to keep those tools for understanding nuance available, even when the topics make us uncomfortable? Something to definitely mull over.